Black public sector workers are in federal court today in the country's largest and most high-profile employment-related discrimination case against the government of Canada.
For over 50 years, the government of Canada has discriminated against black people, has relegated them to the lowest entry in the public service.
It affected my mental health and my physical health.
We are not going to stop fighting until we have justice.
Stop fighting these workers in court. Settle this case. Settle it.
The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated.
After 4 years of fighting for a day in court, black workers are finally here. The certification hearing for the black class action lawsuit begins today.
Black public sector workers are in federal court today in the country's largest and most high-profile employment-related discrimination case against the government of Canada.
For over 50 years, the government of Canada has discriminated against black people, has denied them promotional opportunities, has denied them hiring, relegated them to the lowest entry in the public service.
So we're here today to introduce in the record the government's own reports that demonstrates a culture of anti-black racism at the top of the public service, a culture of anti-black racism at the Human Rights Commission, the body that the government then says we should be seeking justice at, and to ensure that the court has evidence that it needs to support the certification of this class action.
Anytime there was a special project like lifting, he always chose the black ladies. And I hurt myself by lifting a box, and I couldn't stop bleeding. I had to go to emergency. And my doctor had to pull me out from work.
I'm highly qualified, highly respected within and outside Health Canada. I am perfectly bilingual, je parle français et anglais couramment. Mais malgré ça, despite all of that, I'm being discriminated against, including violation of my charter right, and they are bullying me.
I went to one of my white female managers, and I said to her, hey, I'm just wondering why you gave this acting position to this junior colleague who's only been here for 3 months without offering it to myself who's been here for 10 years. She and other managers began hitting me with one sanction after another of increasing severity, culminating with them banning me from all my departmental buildings.
When I approached my manager about getting a position in a higher job, well, you know, you're good, Hannah. And then I realized that a new person has moved up 3 levels above me.
Well, we're hearing similar situations from workers who work at the provincial and municipal levels as well. It's almost as if the employers at all 3 levels are reading from the same or similar playbook.
I applied to a position many years ago with the Federal Public Service. The caller asked my cultural and ethnic background. I told them that I was black, and the phone disconnected on me. And I never got a call back.
I worked with CRE 38 years, and I was forced out of a job that I dedicated my life for. And as a result of that, I was actually on sick leave for 2 years. It affected my mental health and my physical health.
The government knows they're wrong, but they continue.
I know that you're saying the truth, and I know that you're suffering right now, and we are not going to stop fighting until we have justice.
With this class action, we are demanding historic justice.
Stop fighting black employees in court and settle the Thompson class action lawsuit.
Here, here. And black workers are under attack. What do we do? Stand up like that. And black workers are under attack. What do we do? Stand up like that.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the disturbing details of a new internal report describing racism and harassment within some of the most senior ranks of the federal government. It comes as a historic hearing proposing a massive class action lawsuit is being played out in front of the courts. Thousands of Black federal workers who say they face discrimination while on the job are seeking billions of dollars in compensation. CTV's Kamal Karamali reports.
Stacks of papers showing Michael Turner's decades of work at Revenue Canada.
51 and a half years.
Wow. Seems like a long time.
It is a long time.
Retiring this year, and through that time, he says he received one promotion.
My last promotion, in essence, was 1974.
Did you ever train employees that ended up surpassing you?
Definitely. I trained supervisors.
Now a government-funded report released internally this week and shared with CTV News highlights systemic racism at the highest levels of the federal public service, patterns of anti-Black discrimination marked by differential treatment, abuse, cruelty, refusal, and subjugation.
Lack of representation have left many of us with scars.
Gerard Etienne, a former top executive, says he was let go after claims he didn't thoroughly investigate someone's complaint.
Never gave me a chance. It did not matter the evidence I provided to show how thoroughly the issue was investigated.
The report comes just as roughly 30,000 Black public servants are pushing to sue the federal government, alleging discrimination. A hearing at a federal court set to wrap up next week will decide whether they can go ahead with the historic class action lawsuit.
It has been filed against 99 departments across the federal public service,
seeking $2.5 billion in compensation.
To address loss of pension, loss of salary, pain and suffering.
Ottawa has admitted to racism within the federal public service, but says there are protocols for workplace complaints, meaning employees must use the established process instead of taking separate legal action. The court will now decide whether the class action lawsuit can move forward, with Black federal workers not only fighting for compensation, but mental health support and a robust diversity plan. Heather.
Kamal, thank you.
Check. Okay, I see the monitor has switched.
So when they're talking, does that mean that they won't be?
Okay. Follow through that.
Gotta get close.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's fine, so. Hey.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and we can. Yes, it is.
Greetings. My name is Bernadette Betchy, Bernadeth, Betchy, Betchi. I come before you standing on the shoulders of my ancestors as a representative plaintiff and a former employee of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Behind me are brave and courageous plaintiffs, as well as allies and lawyers in this case. For the last 4 years, the government of Canada has spent millions of your taxpayers' dollars fighting Black workers in court. They stood in this courtroom for the last 13 days and admitted that systemic and anti-Black racism exists. And yet, they argue that the court is not the place to address it. They say that workers should have turned to the Federal Labor Board and the Canadian Human Rights Commission, the very same commission that their own federal reports found was rife with discrimination, both against its workers and against the Canadian public they have a mandate to protect. They were successful in keeping that report out of this case as evidence, but they were not successful in dismissing another one of their own reports on discrimination in the public service. Justice Gagné has ruled that parts of an internal audit on blatant and widespread discrimination at the Privy Council can be included as evidence. And now, we're hoping to include yet another shocking government-funded report as evidence. Dr. Rachel Zellers found that Black executives working in the public service have experienced a disturbing pattern of threats, intimidation, abuse, insubordination, subjugation, and harassment so bad it led some to suicidal ideation, and in some cases, even attempts. Because this report came to light so late in their hearing schedule, the justice will rule on whether to include it at a case conference with lawyers in the coming weeks. The government has been fighting tooth and nail to keep this out of the record because they know it it because it know it has a damning because it know it has a damning account of their systemic failures. For the last 13 days, we have heard the government gaslight, dismiss, and minimize the experiences of Black workers, relying on harmful stereotypes, suggesting Black people who were systemically denied promotions and career advancing opportunity simply weren't qualified, or that their experiences were isolated, despite the fact that we have heard the same stories again and again from Black workers across 99 governmental departments, whether they were employed decades ago or today. It is insulting to hear that highly educated individuals with master's degrees and doctorates who consistently watched less experienced white colleagues become their supervisors were just not the best fit. We are demanding justice for 45,000 Black public sectors workers of the past and the present. This is for the Black employee who spent 51 years in public service with only one promotion. This is for the Black executive who was threatened by his white colleague that he would beat the N-word out of him while others watched and said nothing. This is for the Black woman who, after facing years of harassment at work, tried to take her own life. We see you. We believe you. We're fighting for you and for your truth. Enough is enough. No more platitude, no more empty promises, no more dismissing Black workers who have faced decades of discrimination in some of the country's most important institutions. Canada has settled other similar class actions from marginalized groups, including the LGBTQ2S plus community and women facing sexual assault. The government of Canada must settle the Black class action lawsuit now. Nous continuerons à demander, à lutter pour la justice, pour ceux qui sont venus avant nous, pour ceux qui sont maintenant et pour nos enfants. Pour ceux que nous avons perdus dans le combat, dans ce combat et dans cette violence. Ce racisme qui tue et qui nous rend malades. Nous demandons et continuons de demander justice. Lorsque nous gagnons, toute une nation, toute la collectivité globale en bénéficie. Luttons ensemble pour enlever toutes ces barrières systémiques. Demandons au Canada d'entendre nos voix et de faire ce qui est juste. Ne perdons jamais de vue l'importance de notre combat pour un monde plus juste et équitable. Chaque action, chaque voix compte dans la lutte pour un avenir où toutes les inégalités reculent et où chaque individu, peu importe son origine, son statut ou ses croyances, puisse vivre dignement. L'espoir réside dans notre collectivité, dans notre capacité à nous unir, à défendre les droits de ceux qui sont marginalisés et à construire une collectivité globale où la solidarité et l'empathie guident nos choix. Continuons de nous battre ensemble pour que l'équité devienne la norme et non l'exception. Demandons encore au Canada d'entendre nos voix et de faire ce qui est juste. Haché. Merci. I wanted to thank the lawyers who have worked tirelessly on this case, and I now invite Mr. Scheer to come and speak. Thank you.
Can you fold this out for him? Stand next to him.
Hello. My name is Hugh Scheer, Hughschcher. For 30 years, I've worked in employment, human rights, and constitutional law in Canada, and I've worked on some of the country's leading precedent-setting cases. But I must say I am truly humbled to stand with Black federal public servants today in what can only be described as a quest to protect and to secure their very identity as Canadians. This case is not merely about money. It's not merely about position. This is a case about the place of Black people in Canada and the recognition that must be given to our fellow Canadian citizens who seek to serve our country in the noblest and highest ways possible. I confess I am truly astonished as a Canadian and as a person of justice that our own government has taken to task by spending millions of dollars to fight Black Canadians, Black public servants, rather than to recognize what they've already acknowledged to be the true harms and the true discrimination that is at the heart of this action and that has devastated workers, their families, and the Black community of Canada for years. Black people have stood up, and I'm humbled to have been able to stand by them in court as we deliver a message of hope, of justice, and of what true equality should mean for all Canadians. In a civil society such as this, everybody deserves to be treated with respect and deserves to have their identity and their humanity honored and respected. Black Canadians deserve no less and will tolerate no longer receiving no less. They merely ask for fairness. They merely come to court to ask for justice. And we call on our government to recognize their contribution, their role in Canadian society, and what can be done to ensure their rightful place at every level of public service across this country. That's what this case is about. And we're hopeful that the government will choose to partner with and make Black workers an ally rather than an adversary. We come together as Canadians. We come together as servants of this country with the single goal of trying to make Canada better and to try to promote justice and equality for all. We hope we will persevere in this effort. We will certainly not stop trying until we do. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Betty, and one of the counsels on the Black Class Action. I got to start off.
Please spell your name, will you, sir?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Betty, and I'm one of the lawyers representing the plaintiffs in the Black Class Action. On a couple of things. The last 2 days have been very highly emotional. The main plaintiff, Nicholas Thompson, as everyone knows, collapsed in court yesterday. And that really created a little bit of a shadow over the work that we're doing, but also inspired the lawyers for today. This case has been an incredible battle, fighting the Department of Justice, fighting the largest law firm in the country. And the only reason that we're fighting is for Black public service workers to be able to secure their rightful place in Canadian society. Canada is a multicultural country. Black public service workers represent the cream of the crop in the Black community. They're dedicated individuals. There's no room within our public service for them to be called the N-word. There's no room for them to be called the B-word. There's no room for them to be afraid to have to go into work thinking that their supervisors might be members of the Ku Klux Klan. It's a very sad situation that we are actually forced to be here to fight in the courts for what we consider just basic human rights. We're not fighting for Canada. We're not fighting against Canada. We're fighting for Canada. We're fighting for the dream of multiculturalism. We're fighting for our sisters, for our brothers, for our mothers. We're fighting to be recognized as human beings. And many may say, well, how is that possible here in Canada? Well, that's the reality for Black public service workers. It has been the reality for decades. And now they stand up and they say enough is enough. And in doing that, the government have amassed all possible weapons, while at the same time admitting, we have the Prime Minister of Canada admitting that throughout the federal public service, there's anti-Black racism and discrimination. And yet we've had to go through the trauma and the pain of a 13-day certification hearing, which resulted in Nicholas Thompson suffering even greater damage, the kind of damage that many of these plaintiffs have to go through by having to retell their story. We're here fighting for Canada. We're here fighting for Canadians. The very basic rights that we're fighting for is what we feel that all Canadians deserve. Thank you.
We're going to take questions, but his car needs to pass. Just let this car pass.
Just go this way a little bit. Just wait until the car can be.
Calm down. Calm down.
Exactly. Are there questions?
Hold on, maybe Glenn. Courtney, you want to give Glenn a chance to speak?
Yeah, he's
Do we need a mic or something?
Is he in the mic?
Sarah,
Pass. Yeah.
Sarah, come. Yeah.
Cool.
And Sarah.
Thank you.
No, you stay with us. You're talking.
We need body heat.
Yeah, we need body heat bad. I can start or Carol can start.
Good stuff.
Tell me when.
Yep.
Hi everyone. I'm Glenn Hotz. I'm one of the lawyers on this file and had the privilege of starting in 2020 with the drafting and meeting with all the plaintiffs. But I really want to say I'm here with Carol Seff, and Carol is a person who worked at the public service for 27 years. 26 years and got how many promotions? What? Just one promotion, and at the end was making how much money? 27,000 or something. I think it was about $27,000, and that's the point of this case among the myriads of other people who worked there and did not get hired and promoted, including those who applied for jobs but did not get them. And hopefully this will bring Canada to a better point. There's definitely been progress. There's been significant progress since the beginning of this file. In fact, one of the representative plaintiffs, Nicholas Thompson, who my friend Courtney just said is in hospital, called it a hiring frenzy. He said they're in a frenzy to hire Black employees. And I've had people say, thank you for helping me get this job because I wouldn't have got it otherwise. And now they're trying to hire everybody and make the numbers look better. The numbers were deplorable. The history is deplorable. Slavery ended in 1834. There was a Segregation Act passed in 1865. When slavery ended, there was compensation. And everybody, when I say that, thinks, oh, well, people who were slaves got compensated. But that's not how it worked. The slave owners got compensated. And we have systemic discrimination since then. We have systemic silence among the Black community who's not come forward and complained sufficiently. And hopefully this is the beginning of the complaining and the beginning of the quest toward ending anti-Black racism, discrimination, and not just in the public service. And hopefully Canada will be better for it. And I'm going to let Sarah say some things, or Carol. Sarah. Because Sarah did a phenomenal job on this file and kept it all together for all of us and knows it better than we do.
The mic.
I don't know what the mic is. And Carol too.
So my name is Sarah Fonseca, and I'm a paralegal on the file. I will be very brief. At the beginning of this action, I joined right as the claim was filed, December 1st, 2020. And I had the opportunity to speak with multiple class members and obviously the representative plaintiffs. And all I can say is that through speaking with them and hearing their stories, I felt their pain, and their pain is real. And it's an honor to be standing with them today. And with that, I'll pass to Ms. Sip.
It's short. You ready? Yes. I'm happy to say that we had a voice, and this law firm listened to us with all the pain that we were going through all the years. That's all I have to say. But I'm doing this for the young ones coming up. We have to do this. They can't go through what we went through. That's all I have to say.
Can you give the first and last name before you go? So they have that.
My name is Carol, Carol, and the last name is Sip, SIP. And I worked for 26 years at Customs and Excise, Revenue Canada now, CRE.
She has a mic.
Oh,
Sorry, I'll just ask one question, Kofi. Can you just speak to what happens next, what happens now, proceedings?
I'll let, maybe you speak to that.
Do yours, and I can do that.
Okay. She or Courtney should speak to that. Good afternoon. My name is Kofi Champong. I'm one of the lawyers and strategic advisors on this file. I've had a chance to work with an incredible team of lawyers, of paralegals, of plaintiffs, of people like Nicholas, who unfortunately aren't able to join us here today. But we've had the chance to, be part of a historic action. If this case moves forward, it's arguably the largest ever class action in Canadian history from an institutional level. And it's perhaps the most important class action in the modern era as it relates to addressing issues of systemic discrimination and systemic racism and anti-Black racism in this country. Over the last few years, I think all of us have become more conscious and aware of the reality of anti-Black racism and how it's filtered through various institutions, both in public bodies, private institutions, and how it affects people's everyday lives, how it affects their employment opportunities, how it affects their educational opportunities, how it affects our criminal justice system. This case is but one bit or one piece of that broader effort to challenge systemic anti-Black racism, systemic discrimination in this country, and to move this country forward from where it's at right now into a place where we can expect that people can go to a workplace and not have to contend with worrying about not having opportunities solely because of the color of their skin. And it's important because this is something that means more beyond just this community. Other communities, other groups who suffer discrimination have to be conscious of the fact that when they walk into workplaces, there's the potential that they also may not have opportunities simply because of various factors that are beyond their control. So this is a precedent-setting case. This is a case that offers Canada an opportunity to meaningfully address historic injustices and ongoing injustices, and to make Canada live up to its words and its constitution. So I'm humble, I'm thankful, and I want to speak directly a bit to the federal government. I myself, in fact, at one point worked for the provincial Liberals and have been involved in government circles, and I would consider myself part of the perhaps broader Liberal family. And I've had a chance to speak to many members of Parliament over the years, the Prime Minister over the years. And many of them, they understand why this action is necessary. They acknowledge that systemic racism, systemic discrimination, anti-Black racism is real. And yet, when it comes to addressing it by sitting down at the table and not fighting us, that's not what we're fighting. That's not what we're finding. We find that despite these acknowledgements, despite the rhetoric, we face $10 million. We face $10 million worth of lawyers' fees to try and ensure that this case is dismissed. You have to ask yourself what message that ultimately sends. This is a government that has acknowledged Black people directly, that has acknowledged anti-Black racism directly, that has acknowledged the UN Decade for People of African Descent directly. This is a government that has initiated various programs and funds and initiatives to address the impacts of systemic anti-Black racism over the years, and yet turns around then and refuses to settle, refuses to sit down with us, and to find a way to stop fighting its own workers. These are the government's own workers who are helping move its own agenda forward. So that raises a lot of questions. And in a political environment, and an environment where we will all be heading to the polls very soon, I think Black people and allies and people who care about issues of racism need to think about who they're going to support. And I would call on the government to do the right thing and to think about the impacts this has politically on their future as well.
Are you hopeful that you can win your case based on its own merit? Or are you afraid that the opposition might, every little trick they have to discard the case?
You know, the law can be a tool for many things. The law can be a tool to address justice, or it can be a tool to perpetuate injustice. We believe we have a strong case. We believe we have evidence to support what the claimants and the plaintiffs are suggesting is a historical practice and an ongoing practice of anti-Black racism. The government itself, through its own actions, through its own recent calls to hire more Black people into senior roles, to give more Black people opportunities, are demonstrating that they recognize that there's an issue and they're trying desperately to address it. But that does not mean that harms haven't been perpetuated. That does not mean that there isn't a recourse that should be given to those people who are still suffering from these realities. So yes, I think we have a very strong case, and we think that there's tremendous merit. Of course, nobody wants to have to litigate. Nobody wants to have to, spend millions of dollars, time and energy. It's traumatizing to have to go through this, to have your story be denied, to hear legalities used and formalities used to try and dismiss the essence of what you're trying to address. So it does have, it's saddening in that way, but if we have to fight, we'll fight. And I'll let maybe Hugh or Courtney speak a bit more to that as well.
Yeah, someone just speak to next steps.
You have one, Courtney.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you speak to what happens next? There's still the question of the Black Executive Court.
Yeah.
How long it may be before we hear a ruling, and what are the potential outcomes? There may be a different couple scenarios.
a lot of the evidence has been presented.
In the middle.
Into the microphone.
A lot of the evidence has been presented during this process here. There is still the outstanding motion dealing with Dr. Zellers and her report regarding the Black Executive Network. There'll be a case conference that'll be held in about 10 days or so, and then we'll try and figure out the next steps in addressing that. A large part of the certification efforts, though, came to an end today, but the case is not at an end until those matters are outstanding or resolved.
And what are the potential scenarios? She rules to accept. She could choose a different class period. Like, what are the different? She could rule out some. Can you just speak to that?
I'm going to let Hugh speak to that because I think he's.
We're hopeful that the court will recognize the merits of the case we put forward. We hope that they will certify the class action. And then once that's done, that will enable the opportunity to have a hearing on the common issues in order to move this matter forward towards a just resolution, because we know that every day of justice delayed is justice denied. And the reality is, for Black people in Canada, that that's just too long. And years ago, the clerk of the Privy Council put out a call to action, calling on deputy heads and hiring managers and leaders across the public service to take proactive steps to ensure principles of equity, equality, and diversity are applied, particularly to Black workers across the public service. The time to answer that call to action is now. The release of last week's report of severe rampant anti-Black racism at the executive levels across the public service of Canada is extremely alarming. And the reality is that steps need to be taken now to address it, because otherwise more people are going to die or are going to try to die, and that's just not the way Canada should operate. So we again call on the government to recognize the reality that it's acknowledged, and at the same time to meet Black people where they are and to enable a just and fair result, either through a negotiated resolution or alternatively through a just hearing on the merits of what we know to be a noble cause and a just case.
Do you have any indication on how long it could be, days, weeks, months before a decision and possible outcomes? If it amend the past period or reject some portions of the 99 departments?
The likelihood is it will be months. It's a complicated set of issues, although it boils down to two very simple questions. Is what's happened to Black people just? And what are we going to do about it if it's not? And in terms of the next steps, we'll wait and see. We're not going to presume what the court may or won't do. They've heard carefully the arguments of both sides, and we're hopeful that they will realize the importance, the true pain of the reality of experience of Black people across this country, and will take steps to redress it in a way that gives justice and equity true meaning for Black people. Thank you.
I also want to add that from the very beginning, 3 years ago, the plaintiffs extended an offer to the government to sit down at the table, to explore alternative judicial dispute resolution. I'm going to make that offer. I'm going to make that offer to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. I'm going to make that offer to the Attorney General. Now is the time to sit down with Black public service workers and let's try and find a solution to create a better Canada. This is what we're trying to do, not to fight against the government, not to fight against Canada, but to continue to help to build Canada. And so I extend that invitation both to the Prime Minister and to the Attorney General. Now is your time. Now is the time of opportunity to bring to an end the decades of pain and suffering that Black people have endured in this country.
I do. This is Gary from Black News Live. What would you say the best thing we can do to help motivate community to find a resolve or just support? Like, we need a supporting system, or we're here to bring them the information, but we need to make sure that we get a support from our community.
I think what we have to recognize is that this is a fight for all Canadians. One of the things that, as a result of the work of the case, there is a proposal for amendment of the Employment Equity Act. That amendment is not just for Black people; it's also for the LGBTQ community, and so all communities. The work that we're doing is going to be beneficial for all communities. This is not just a Black issue. This is a Canadian issue.
Just grab your mic. That's okay.
Next
Thank you.
issue.
I would like to thank everyone that came today. Merci beaucoup à tous et à toutes d'être venus aujourd'hui. I'm speaking to all of you at home. We need all of your support for this to move forward, for Canada to settle this case. You can write to your MPs and you can go to your social media, amplify the voice of, Black Canadians, and make sure that you continue pushing this forward all together. Together, we can be stronger. Together, we will be stronger. Together, we are stronger. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Merci.
Black public sector workers are in federal court today in the country's largest and most high-profile employment-related discrimination case against the government of Canada.
For over 50 years, the government of Canada has discriminated against Black people, has relegated them to the lowest entry in the public service.
It affected my mental health and my physical health.
We are not going to stop fighting until we have justice.
Stop fighting these workers in court. Settle this case. Settle it.
The workers united will never be defeated. The workers united will never be defeated.
After 4 years of fighting for a day in court, Black workers are finally here. The certification hearing for the Black class action lawsuit begins today.
Black public sector workers are in federal court today in the country's largest and most high-profile employment-related discrimination case against the government of Canada.
For over 50 years, the government of Canada has discriminated against Black people, has denied them promotional opportunities, has denied them hiring, relegated them to the lowest entry in the public service.
So we're here today to introduce in the record the government's own reports that demonstrates a culture of anti-Black racism at the top of the public service, a culture of anti-Black racism at the Human Rights Commission, the body that the government then says we should be seeking justice at, and to ensure that the court has evidence that it needs to support the certification of this class action.
Anytime there was a special project like lifting, he always chose the Black ladies. And I hurt myself by lifting a box, and I couldn't stop bleeding. I had to go to emergency. And my doctor had to pull me out from work.
I'm highly qualified, highly respected within and outside Health Canada. I am perfectly bilingual, je parle français et anglais couramment. Mais malgré ça, despite all of that, I'm being discriminated against, including violation of my charter right, and they are bullying me.
I went to one of my white female managers, and I said to her, hey, I'm just wondering why you gave this acting position to this junior colleague who's only been here for 3 months without offering it to myself who's been here for 10 years. She and other managers began hitting me with one sanction after another of increasing severity, culminating with them banning me from all my departmental buildings.
When I approached my manager about getting a position in a higher job, well, you're good, Hannah. And I realized that a new person has moved up 3 levels above me.
Well, we're hearing similar situations from workers who work at the provincial and municipal levels as well. It's almost as if the employers at all 3 levels are reading from the same or similar playbook.
I applied to a position many years ago with the Federal Public Service. The caller asked my cultural and ethnic background. I told them that I was Black, and the phone disconnected on me. And I never got a call back.
I worked with CRE 38 years, and I was forced out of a job that I dedicated my life for. And as a result of that, I was actually on sick leave for 2 years.
It affected my mental health and my physical health.
The government knows they're wrong, but they continue.
I know that you're saying the truth, and I know that you're suffering right now, and we are not going to stop fighting until we have justice.
With this class action, we are demanding historic justice.
Stop fighting black employees in court and settle the Thompson class action lawsuit.
Here, here.